So much of the focus has gone to the players that Miami didn't land or hasn't landed in the transfer portal. You'd be surprised at how high Miami's transfer class actually ranks.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode, we'll talk about remaining Miami portal targets. And, for those who unplugged last night, Miami landed another transfer, safety out of Tennessee, Jakobe Thomas. We will talk the latest on AJ Haulcy. That portal recruitment has turned into a roller coaster and a bit of a circus. We'll tell you where things stand. But let's talk about where Miami now stands in the transfer portal. And they may not be done yet, right? Of course, signings of players can continue into and throughout this month. We get this question from our great Locked On Canes insider, Pat Mack, who says, hey, last week, I asked where our portal standing was at. And yeah, a lot has changed since last week because Miami has landed, 5 players in the last 5 days, 6 players. He says, with the latest additions, I think Pat says we should be in the top 10, if not the top 5. Then an additional question would be, in your opinion, which transfer portal player will be the most valuable? I'm split between Kamal Bonner and Shamar Brown. He says, thanks again for all the hard work you do for us. Well, like I said, so much of the focus has been on hey, Miami was in it for Trevor Pena. He goes to Penn State, right? Miami liked the defensive tackle out of Florida, DeAndre Robinson. He goes to North Carolina. Miami's trying to get AJ Haulcy. He may or may not be trending in Miami's direction. So much of the focus has been on players that Miami isn't landing. In reality, the Miami Hurricanes now, to answer Pat Mack's question, now have the 3rd ranked transfer portal class in America. Now, that combines the players Miami landed in January, because it's all class of 2025. So that combines the players you landed in January with the players Miami has landed in April and into May. But the only teams with higher ranked transfer classes are the LSU Tigers at number 1 and Texas Tech at number 2. Then you've got Miami, who moved into that 3rd spot. Jakobe Thomas was decisive to move Miami from number 4 up to number 3. Then you've got Ole Miss in 4th, Oregon 5th. Rounding out the top 10, you've got Florida State, Missouri, Auburn, North Carolina, and Kentucky. So the Miami Hurricanes now have the 3rd rated transfer portal class in America. And I mentioned all of the players Miami has added since this past Saturday. Between Saturday and Thursday, Miami landed North Carolina State linebacker Kamal Bonner, Texas kicker Bert Auburn, BYU receiver and kick returner Keelan Marion, Cincinnati receiver Tony Johnson, North Dakota State running back Chamar Marty Brown, and then last night, Tennessee Volunteers safety Jakobe Thomas. And we did a whole episode on Thomas last night. In case you missed it, make sure you check it out. But I thought this was a big ad for Miami, especially given all the uncertainty around AJ Haulcy, who we'll talk about in a minute. But I think regardless of what happens with Haulcy, Miami was going after both of them. They didn't view it as an either-or situation. I think Miami was and is interested in adding multiple transfer portal safeties. And something I mentioned about Jakobe Thomas last night, a little unsure of it at the time I was speaking to you guys, but I double-checked with a friend of mine who covers the Tennessee Volunteers, and he said, yeah, in their minds, Jakobe Thomas was trending into Tennessee's starting lineup for this coming season. So it's not as if he left the Volunteers because he was worried about the playing time there. He projected as a starter in Tennessee. So, Jakobe Thomas could very well end up. He's got to earn it, of course. Training camp is going to count for everything, but he has an opportunity to be a starting safety at Miami. And for that reason, to answer the back end of Pat Mack's question, you asked me, who is going to be the most valuable portal player that Miami, and I'm only going to go by the guys we've added in the past week, because if I zoom out to, winter, then, the obvious answer is Carson Beck, your starting quarterback. So I'm only going to talk about these last 6 players Miami has landed since last Saturday. And I'm actually going to say Jakobe Thomas, because I think safety was the biggest position of need there. And this is a player who could very well become a starter at Miami. And I guess that would depend on whether or not Miami is still able to land AJ Haulcy, which is doubtful at this point. But I'm going to say Jakobe Thomas, right? And these players are all important, right? Kamal Bonner adds an important option depth piece, potential starter at linebacker. I mean, some might argue adding the kicker, right? Because you didn't have a clear-cut top kicker and you lost Andy Borregales. So Bert Auburn has a really important job. Keelan Marion is someone who is going to add an important, veteran to the receiver rotation and a guy who could maybe score some special teams touchdowns for us. Tony Johnson adds a ton of experience at slot receiver. I don't want to downplay Marty Brown either, because you're talking about the most outstanding freshman in all of FCS football last year and was a big contributor, 1,200 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns on the national championship team from FCS last year. I'm not sleeping on Marty Brown, but my answer, Jakobe Thomas, I think is going to be the most valuable of these transfer additions so far. When we come back, let's talk about what's going on with AJ Haulcy, who did set up a visit to a different school. He had that visit with Miami and the Prime 112 meal with Rick Ross. We'll talk about the latest developments in the recruitment of Houston safety AJ Haulcy when we come back, folks. We are only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the conference, all the big storylines, transfer portal stuff, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, so AJ Haulcy. It's been, for the past couple of days, Miami versus LSU tug of war for the first team all Big 12 safety out of Houston. He's got the connection to Zach Etheridge, who was his position coach at Houston, is now cornerbacks coach at Miami. A few days ago, it was a Miami versus Ole Miss versus LSU battle. It's been more of a Miami versus LSU battle for the last couple of days. But AJ Haulcy's agents have really kind of upped the ante in this battle, right? It was widely reported, and I have confirmed this to be the case since yesterday, that AJ Haulcy, his agents are trying to get a $2 million NIL deal for him for 1 year. That is the demand. That doesn't necessarily mean anyone's meeting that demand, but they're trying to get a $2 million NIL deal, which realistically, nobody's going to give that to him. Okay. I mean, we know like Miami are big players in NIL, and rival fans will say they overspend on everybody. Believe me, Miami is not going to offer $2 million for a safety unless somebody cloned Sean Taylor. That's the only way that would happen. LSU also is not going to go up to $2 million. In fact, it's been reported that for whatever the NIL offers are, which are, I think, high six figures, not into seven figures, Miami may have the slightly higher offer right now than LSU's offer, but neither of them are in the 2 million range. Okay. And both Miami and LSU have reportedly said they're not going any higher for those offers. But of course, the agent is still trying to get 2 million. I view that as an aggressive negotiating ploy to try and really spur a bidding war between Miami and LSU and whoever else wants to get involved. And apparently neither side is willing to match that price, but maybe they figure by setting an astronomical price, they can cause the schools to at least go up and meet them in the middle. Okay. Now, I believe based on, the vibes over the past couple of days, well, really the past 24 hours or so, I believe, and I hope I'm wrong, but I believe that AJ Haulcy really wants to play in the SEC. So if the money is close, it's my opinion he's going to end up being an LSU Tiger over Miami. I think Miami may have to probably overpay to make this happen, that there would be an ACC tax, right? The all-conference calamity, right? He'd prefer to be in the SEC, so it may cost more for an ACC school to land him. In fact, something that, we have been wondering for the past couple of days, right? Why the situation seemed to favor Miami, because he visited Miami earlier this week, had not taken a visit to LSU. Well, as of late last night, Haulcy's agents told several news outlets that he does plan to visit LSU this weekend. I don't think they've finalized the trip yet. And I think the reason they haven't finalized the trip yet is LSU's coaches have been out on the recruiting trail. So they've got to scramble their schedules to get back in Baton Rouge to host this visit. But it's expected that it's going to happen. And, you're going to see that once AJ Haulcy does arrive at LSU, once the visit gets finalized, LSU is going to be reported as the favorite in this recruitment, and understandably so, because again, it's being widely reported now. Like Pete Nakos, Savon3 has reported that, AJ Haulcy favors the idea of playing in the SEC. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. And again, it's like, they're reportedly asking for $2 million. They're not going to get that from either side. There's no salary cap for NIL. So of course, a player has the right to request whatever sum of money they want, no matter how astronomically high that is. But there is a risk, like the risk of overplaying your hand and possibly asking for too much money. We saw how that played out with Nico Iamaleava, Tennessee, now UCLA. The risk of asking for too much money could involve completely turning off a coaching staff. Because if a coaching staff were to agree to pay you a massive amount of money, that information, because people report on that, it goes public, that information can divide your locker room, and it can cause you having a line out the door of the rest of your players asking for pay raises. And it can cause a lot of troubles from within your locker room. So that is the risk. That's the risk of overplaying your hand, okay? That you could completely turn off a coaching staff because of that. So again, I think it's a good thing from where Miami is concerned. Like I would still love to have AJ Haulcy in Miami, right? Because this is the best safety available in the portal, an absolute stud the past couple of years at Houston. But it's a good thing, just in case this doesn't go Miami's way, that Miami was able to lock up that commitment from Jakobe Thomas, who, comes in ready to work and ready to be a Hurricane. Thomas loves the culture. He appreciates Mario Cristobal. Miami really made him feel wanted and needed, because I think Jakobe Thomas understands that Miami really needed experienced bodies in their safety room. So I'm happy he's a Cane. As far as remaining transfer portal targets, this is a player who's not really been trending in Miami's direction in recent days, but I wonder if things continue to trend in the wrong way for AJ Haulcy, perhaps Miami can circle back for safety Gregory Smith III from Florida. He does remain uncommitted after he's visited Miami, visited North Carolina. He did get a crystal ball to land at North Carolina, but nothing official there yet. And he's also visited Purdue as of late this week. On Thursday, he was at Purdue. So perhaps, Miami may circle back to Gregory Smith, but he may end up being a Tar Heel. There's a big visit that I think has ended now, but when it went last night into today from Rutgers linebacker Mohamed Toure, I would love to land that player. And again, Miami has already landed a good linebacker in Kamal Bonner. Mohamed Toure, who is very versatile, a jack linebacker. I think this could be a great addition if Miami can get him. And he was coached by Corey Heatherman, was his position coach at Rutgers 2 years ago. In fact, 2023 was the last time that Toure actually played because he suffered an ACL injury last year, did not play in 2024. So he had his breakout season, his best season was when Corey Heatherman was his linebackers coach 2 years ago. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. He has already visited Penn State, then he visited Miami, and he's off to Indiana today. So it seems he's going to decide between Penn State, Indiana, and Miami. You know, Penn State has been, or had been at least, considered a strong favorite for him. I think some people thought he might not even get to the rest of his visits, but he is finishing out his visits. So we'll see if Miami can close the deal there. That's another important transfer portal target for the Hurricanes. I want to get into more questions from you guys. And if you want to get your questions to the front of the line, become a Locked On Canes insider. Click that link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. When you become a Locked On Canes insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours and vice versa. One-on-one questions and answers, breaking news, recruiting updates, transfer portal reports, all of that good stuff. Just click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 2 weeks. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. We get this question from our pal Delane. Good morning, Donno, he says. So what do you think will be the national reaction to Miami not landing its top target out of the portal? He's talking about AJ Haulcy. With him asking for $2 million, I'd have to assume it's going to be Miami is broke again would be the reaction. You know, honestly, I'm not gonna claim that like, hey, Miami's gonna get favorable coverage, but I think the opposite would be true. I think if Miami did land AJ Haulcy, the reaction would be, look at that, Miami's overpaying for a guy. How dare Miami do that again? I think there would be a stronger reaction if Miami does land Haulcy. If Miami were to beat LSU and Ole Miss for him, I think there'd be a stronger reaction if Miami gets him because the SEC, they're supposed to beat the ACC for players like this. So, yeah, I mean, if AJ Haulcy, you know, if he commits to LSU, which I think it's trending in that direction, then, yeah, we're going to get trolled by Gators fans and Seminoles fans like we do anytime we don't get a player that we target. But that's par for the course. Those losers are always going to troll us at every opportunity that they get. But really, I mean, if Miami doesn't land Haulcy, I don't think the reaction is going to be as strong as you think. I think if Miami did land Haulcy, I think you're going to see people pointing at us and being like, they're overpaying for somebody again. Who would want to play in Miami by choice? You want to be in Baton Rouge. You want to be in Oxford. I think you're going to have a stronger reaction if it goes the other way. We get a question from Jeff who says, hey, what's the latest on Ryan Moret? Yeah, the friend of the show, interior offensive lineman center from Miami Southridge. He says, I know he's scheduled to visit Ole Miss, Nebraska, then Miami on June 20th. He says, what's the general feeling about him, and what are your thoughts about him? Yeah, I mean, we had Moret on the show about a month and a half ago, and he loves Miami. I mean, he's a Miami guy, Southridge. You know, I think he's enjoying his process, and he's taking his visits, but Ryan Moret has a really special bond with Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal. And, you know, I know a big part of Moret's focus is he does want to go through with his final high school wrestling season. He's a big-time wrestler, state champion from this year. And, you know, he's going to be a senior in high school next year. Normal protocol, as long as you're at a high school that allows it, normal protocol these days is to graduate high school early and enroll in college, you know, in January. But Moret doesn't want to do that because he's stud wrestler. He wants to do his senior wrestling season and tournament. And one of the important things that Moret told me when we interviewed him was he says that Alex Mirabal of Miami told him, like, yeah, if you come to Miami, we will totally let you finish out your wrestling career and you don't have to enroll early. So I know that was a big thing. I don't know how other schools feel about that, but according to the player himself, Miami's offensive line coach gave him the green light that if you want to finish your wrestling season, which goes deep into the spring next year, you can do that. So I hope he ends up being a Cane. And, he's a great center, got a lot of dog in him. And I am always a big fan. Miami already has one committed in Ben Cogden, who's a big time wrestler. I think the skill set and the toughness you get from wrestling translates so well into football, especially offensive line with all the leverage and all that. So I'm a huge fan of Ryan Moret. We get this question from the 727 who says, how many more slot receivers is Miami going to get? All of them. Bring me all of your slot receivers. I mean, we missed out on Trevor Pena. Tony Johnson is a slot receiver. Keelan Marion can play on the outside, I believe. So he's got that body type, but I don't think he has to be a slot guy. And yeah, Miami already has Nathaniel Ray Joseph and Malachi Toney, who's only going to be a true freshman this year. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having, older guys above him. You can kind of work Malachi into it gracefully, which is probably the right way to do it. But yeah, I mean, listen, Miami's got a lot of slot receivers. I don't think we're going to sign any more, though. I think we're probably done at the moment. We'll answer more questions on the other side. Off-season workouts and player-led practices are going on. Somebody asked me about, the most disappointing Miami players in the NFL, like any draft busts and all that. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends? We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. You can't ruin a Friday, right? We're all doing great today. Big weekend coming up. We get this question from Mikey, who says, hey, have you heard anything about the player-led practices? Honestly, no. I'm going to be completely honest. I could make something up and tell you, oh my God, everybody's tearing it up. I haven't heard any feedback yet on the player-led practices, which is probably a good thing. Work in silence. We know that as of about 2.5 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago, Carson Beck has been cleared to throw. I don't think he immediately went out there and started throwing 70-yard bombs. I think he's kind of easing his arm into it after the elbow surgery. But with Beck being cleared to throw, and, for those who watched that really awesome interview that Beck did with that Georgia show a week or so ago, the Built for More podcast, you can see how excited he is, what a great football mind he has. And, Beck, I know people have tried to question his leadership, but he came off on that pod sounding like a leader of men. So we hope to hear more about the player-led workouts because, Beck has got to get to know his receivers. I mean, I expect him to build fast chemistry with CJ Daniels, who we've heard about his leadership. He holds his own meetings with receivers as if he's a second receivers coach. I love that leadership from Daniels, 6-year guy from LSU. JoJo Trader had a tremendous spring. I'm glad Nykar is staying with Miami despite dipping his toe into the transfer portal. I think it's big that we retain him on the roster. So yeah, hopefully we'll get more feedback on the player-led workouts soon. We get this question from Sammy. Says, hey, I've always wanted to ask you, who are some Canes that you thought were going to be legendary but just didn't pan out in the NFL? He says, the first name that comes to my mind is Amon Richards, but his was because of an injury. It's funny because Amon, who I've gotten to know Amon a little bit. He was another one came right into my mind. He had the career-ending neck injury at the end of his college career, so he was never able to play in the pros. I think he would have been a great pro. I think Amon had all the physical and mental tools to dominate in the NFL, so it was just unfortunate that never came to pass for him. A few other names that come into my mind, and luckily, I had to think long and hard about this one because a lot of the Hurricanes players that came out of Miami, and we knew oh my gosh, this guy is special. So many of them did pan out, right? Like Frank Gore, Sean Taylor. I mean, obviously Sean Taylor, his career was cut short with the tragedy, but you knew he was going to be impactful in the NFL, and he was. You knew Ed Reed was going to be a legend in the NFL. If anything, he exceeded your expectations. There have been so many that did pan out, but another name that comes to my mind, Yatil Green in the late 90s. His career was derailed by injuries. Jerome McDougal was a 15th overall pick in the draft, only played 4 years in the NFL. I think he had 3 career sacks. Now, McDougal, it was another. I think his career was affected by he was. There was an armed robbery at his house, and he was shot in the abdomen, and I think that affected his career. That happened like right at the beginning of his NFL career, so that was unfortunate. And another one I thought. Not going to say I thought he was going to be a legend or anything, but I thought Brad Kaya would have an opportunity to maybe get some starts and at least try to earn a starting job in the NFL. But that career didn't pan out after he was drafted in the 6th round, which was later than we thought he was going to go. So that's a few. And if you guys have any more like Hurricanes players who didn't pan out the way that you thought they would in the pros, let us know in the comments below. Leave those comments to us here at Locked On Canes. We get this question from Quan the Cane, who says, hey, any update on the House versus NCAA settlement? Will the new roster limits take effect this season and an NIL salary cap? Well, as far as the NIL thing, assuming if the House settlement gets passed, the NIL is mostly going to come through the schools with the settlement payments. You're still going to be able to get third-party NIL, but they scrutinize it a lot more. Like any payment over $600, you'll have to go through a clearinghouse, and it sounds very complicated. So there's still a way to get third-party NIL deals done. They're just making it a lot more difficult. But the roster limits is the big one. Like the roster limits could actually decide whether this passes or not, because the lawyers want to implement these roster limits. But any player who's ever been a walk-on or is currently a walk-on is super pissed about this, because that's going to be taking their roster spots away in favor of more scholarship players. And the judge, Claudia Wilkin, does not want to pass the settlement unless they take away the roster limits or they grandfather in roster spots. So that's the latest. This is an update from 2 days ago from Yahoo Sports. It says, during meetings this week among NCAA and Power Conference executives and attorneys, a proposal to phase in the new roster limits has emerged. However, no plan has been finalized as leaders work to find the solution to a judge's order last week to protect athletes on existing rosters and assure the approval of the settlement, an agreement expected to usher in revenue sharing with athletes. Such a move, the grandfathering in of roster positions, comes with a bevy of questions, concerns, and uncertainties. Will schools be mandated to grandfather in roster positions, or will it be voluntary? If it's voluntary, it does nothing because they're all going to opt not to do it, right? What of players who have already transferred elsewhere? What happens to recruits who signed with other schools because their original commitment wasn't honored? And most notably, how exactly will the judge react to whatever proposal is put forward? Because again, the judge has given the impression she does not want to pass the settlement unless they protect roster spots from walk-on players at these universities. That's something she's very passionate about. And like they mentioned in the article, a lot of these players have already been told your roster spot is gone. See ya, goodbye. And they've already had to make a decision to leave sports or to find another school to play for. So that has been the big sticking point in the House settlement. We get a question from the Giant Ninja, who knows where I was midweek. I mean, everybody knows where I was midweek. I was at the new Epic Universe theme park at Universal Studios. Hey, how awesome was Epic Universe? The Giant Ninja asks. I just booked my hotel room for Thanksgiving week. It was maybe the most incredible theme park I've been to. I mean, if you're a Super Mario, like old school Nintendo geek like I am, 90s glory days, the Super Nintendo world, I want to live there. Like, I want to take up residence in Bowser's Castle or Peach's Castle. Like, I want to live in Super Nintendo world. It is amazing. The roller coaster, the Stardust Racers is awesome. My son and my wife are really into How to Train Your Dragon. They've got the whole area there. They got the Monsters area. The Monsters ride is incredible. Didn't get to do the new Harry Potter ride because it was like closed most of the day, but the Harry Potter area, which looks like Paris, is really cool. I highly recommend. Like, Epic Universe was awesome. And I highly recommend you guys smash the like button and subscribe. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your pods. We'll see what happens with AJ Haulcy, who's planning to visit LSU. I think the ship is sailing on that one. I hope I'm wrong. But we'll see. We'll talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.